wanted the best? You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Well, hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Hey, welcome to the big show, folks. We certainly appreciate it. And now, a man who is emerging in 2023 on January 3rd, the recording date of this, to become a beautiful butterfly for 2023. I'm going to fly away right now. That's the video you're seeing on YouTube. Welcome to the big show, Voss, thechrisvossshow.com. There you go. Hey, guys, be sure to check us out. We're going to CES in 2 days. It's the big CES 2023 show. And we've got about 30 or 40 appointments of brilliant CEOs and people we're going to be interviewing. It's going to be a massive show. We're going to be doing updates on live. You'll see it on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, all those crazy places. So be sure to follow us on those channels as well. Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. We're going to be interviewing and reviewing like all this cool technology like AI, VR, dial-up phones, hand dial phones, all the latest gadgets, kids, and probably retro gadgets too. I don't know. That seems to always be a thing. But we're going to be at CES doing that for 3 or 4 days. You probably saw our interview with the CEO of CES, the CTA, Gary Shapiro, my good friend who appears every year on the show. And it's going to be crazy. We're going to be announcing a lot of stuff, so be sure to watch for that as well. Today, we have an amazing author on the show. And we only have amazing authors on the show. Anytime someone says, hey, can I come on the show? And we're like, you're an author who sucks. No, we're not mean like that. That's not what we do. It's not a great way to behave, people. We only have amazing authors. That's basically what I'm trying to say on the show. He's the author of the latest book that comes out today, January 3rd, 2023, The Fun Habit, How the Pursuit of Joy and Wonder Can Change Your Life, which is a great way to lead off January 3rd, the beginning of the year, making a fun habit and pursue better parts of your life. Mike Rucker, PhD, is on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his amazing new book and how to have a better year and a better life. If you're listening to this 10 years from now, like some people do on our channels, this hopefully you'll be able to look back and go, wow, it's a good thing I listened to that show. And if not, you can always catch up 10 years from now or 5 years from now. Dr. Mike Rucker is a organizational psychologist. His ideas about fun and health have been featured in Psychology Today, Forbes, Vox, Thrive Global, and more. Named one of the 10 digital changemakers by the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society. He currently serves as a senior leader at Active Wellness, and you can learn more from him at his website. We'll get into that in a second. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rucker. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. This is my coming out podcast, as it were.
There you go. You're a beautiful new butterfly launching your new book. That's the joke we do at the beginning, or one of them. Anyway, give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Yeah, thanks for that. michaelrucker.com. Pretty easy to remember.
There you go. And so what motivated you want to write this book?
Yeah, so I've been studying positive psychology for some time, and the tools of that trade had served me for quite a while. I really got into it about 2005, 2006, became a charter member of the International Positive Psychology Association. And for folks that don't know what that is, it's essentially a movement of psychology that wanted to use the tools of psychology, not just to fix mental deficits or treat mental health problems, but give them to lay people that, want to better themselves in some way. So don't necessarily have something they're trying to fix, but can use them to help themselves flourish. And so I had, been a purveyor of that space and used these tools fairly successfully, but I really over time had started to chase happiness and, kind of was trying to over optimize my life for happiness. And unfortunately in 2016, I kind of got knocked on my butt for a couple of reasons. One was my younger brother passed away quite suddenly for an unexpected reason. He died of a pulmonary embolism. And I had been an avid athlete up until that point. And so these two things don't have a relation to each other, but a couple of months later found out that I had advanced osteoarthritis. So, I'd used running as a way to mitigate stress and anxiety up until that point, and was told by doctors, because I had, had this ailment at such a young age, that I essentially couldn't run anymore. And so, I had been, Mr. Positivity, Mr. Optimism up until that point, and was really trying to like will myself out of this malaise, out of this despair that, really was an appropriate response for what was happening to me. But I was just trying to not accept that. And paradoxically, as I was trying to chase happiness, I ended up being less happy. And, to the point I was kind of, grinding myself into the ground. And I found that quite interesting. And I guess, using this word serendipity is kind of weird in this context, but around that same time, there was all of this emerging research to suggest that, especially here in the US, this, what's now commonly referred to as toxic positivity, really causing a lot of, low-level mental illness, actually. The more that the motivation doesn't really match, your level at that time, can lead to some really interesting and, unfortunate sort of outcomes. And so I wanted, if all of these tools that had been helpful up until that point weren't working anymore, I needed to figure out how to fix myself, right? And so that was sort of, the beginning of this journey of trying to figure out if you can't have this over concern and will yourself out of unhappy, what can you do? And what I discovered is that a lot of us aren't actively reclaiming our agency and autonomy. A lot of us have just habituated our lives in ways that, just kind of run into each other. And that just being a little bit mindful of how we spend our time and reintegrating play and fun into our daily lives really can be all that's needed to get ourselves out of things that, are unfortunate, whether it's the loss of someone, whether that's someone going through a divorce, whatever it is. When we realize that we have a little bit more control over how we spend our time, even in the context of bad things that might be happening to us, then we're able to pick ourselves up and really start to enjoy life again.
So what is the definition of toxic positivity? I haven't heard that term too much. I know there's what's that work thing that they like to do? It kind of comes out of bro code in San Francisco, the hustler sort of attitude, and people have been getting hustler burnout where, working 24/7 and kind of the attitude of not taking any time off. What's the definition of toxic positivity?
I think it's the old adage, good vibes only, which I certainly conveyed, this idea that bad emotions are somehow problematic, right? That none of us have bad days. And if you have one, that somehow, you need to course correct it immediately. And I think, from a deeper level, from, more of the geek side, it's when you're providing motivation to someone that doesn't really hit, right? And so when that happens, when there's this motivational misalignment, like, wow, okay, I guess I really should have good days only, good vibes only, or whatever it is. And that's not necessarily where you're at. Then you start to have dissonance about, okay, wow, well, everyone around me, is living the good life, which isn't true at all, right? Most of us are living, especially online, curated lives, right? And so there starts to be this misidentification about who you really are. And that's when it gets really problematic. I unpack this in the book, but once you see happiness as somewhere off in the distance, then you start to really ruminate on that gap between where you want to be and where you are. And over time, what happens is that identity, right, of, okay, well, I'm not happy yet, starts to sort of evolve into, well, I must be an unhappy person. And that can happen at the subconscious level. And that's when things really go awry, because then it becomes harder and harder to get back, to, your level of happiness that you were at, pre, episode, whether again, that's, loss, change, divorce, whatever it is.
Let me ask you this. We live in this Instagram age. I've been a social media dude, coming of age with Twitter in 2008. And I've watched the evolving nature of it, and what was originally, this beautiful promise, this revolution, and the world's going to be more kumbaya. We're all going to be like John Lennon, sit around and and sing Imagine all the people living in peace. And now it's the Pandora's box is completely open, and the beautiful thing that we saw coming out of it has turned into kind of a hellspawn. We live in a world where these people in the Instagram age, I mean, I don't know if you study the young people on TikTok, but there's a lot of delusion where the FOMO, the fear of missing out, you have people that can pay to go sit in a fake plane in a Hollywood studio that's a cutout plane and pretend that they're flying on planes. They go on dates and take pictures on the dates like they're living the high life, and it's crazy.
It's manufactured for sure.
It's totally so much of it's manufactured, and like but the problem is people believe it, especially women. They really believe it. In the dating markets, and I've seen interviews with people, and they're like, yeah, I want to find a millionaire, trillionaire freaking dude. And you're like, do you really? There's maybe 1% of the of the population does that. We live in this really messed up world where there's so much delusion. And you're right. I mean, I thought when I got money, I'd be happy. I grew up poor. And so I tried to overcompensate. And when I became rich and was able to buy all the toys I want, turn my house into a giant toy store, arcade, if you will, I thought it would make me happy. And I thought the pursuit of working so hard and grinding and never taking vacations made me happy. And I was more miserable when I had more money than ever. I was more miserable than ever.
Yeah, no, so I think what happens is we get disconnected to what really lights us up, right? And so, you had mentioned social media. It starts to become manufactured from these external influences, right? So one, you start to stop thinking for yourself, and you're like, okay, what are other people doing? And that might not necessarily be what you want, but you get kind of baited, right? Well, they look happy. They have this big smile. Like, maybe I should be doing this. When that doesn't resonate with you at all, if you spent the time to kind of understand what it is that really makes you happy. So that's one problem. The other is this artificial currency of how you're rewarded, right? So I call it, the nothing army, right? You have all of these folks that have no interest in your well-being, incentivizing you through likes and comments, that are really built by an external algorithm. So they don't mean anything to you, but slowly over time, you're trained to believe that they do, right? Like, oh my gosh, well, this thing obviously is interesting, so let me do more of it, even though it adds nothing to your own betterment, right? And so just taking one step back, not necessarily villainizing social media, because I think it's a great way to stay connected with people. But if it's ultimately what's driving your decisions, then you need to take a hard look at, okay, why has that happened? And then two, spend a little bit of time, reconnecting with what it is that really does make you happy, and not necessarily worrying so much about, these external outcomes that don't really have any bearing on your life.
Yeah, it's I think people think that, well, I should be happy like that person, or that person's doing this, or they're flying on vacation. And there's so many people that you see that are fake it so hard, and then when they get called out or they get caught, you're just like, oh wow. I remember there was a famous married couple that are running around talking about being married, and they're driving all these nice cars. Turn out they're just running huge scams. They get arrested. They're going to jail for a long time. You're just like, wow, they're just ripping people off. I mean, the fire festival years ago. But yeah, I don't think social media is to blame, but it seems like there's some people that need to read your book and go, hey man, not all that glitters is gold, and the fence is the green grass isn't always better on the other side. So what is a fun habit? You talk about your book about starting to build fun habits. What does that term mean?
Well, so essentially, it's just looking at the fact that we aren't spending enough time at all on activities that do bring joy and delight. So I guess, just last week, there was a LinkedIn news article about how we're second to last in the world with regards to our communal use of PTO in America. It was, there's one other country, I forget which it is, but we're second to last. We get 10 days a year and we don't use those, right? other countries throughout the world really do protect that time outside of work.
Mhm.
Not only that, but I believe within this post, they cited a recent study that showed 20% of the people out there in the workforce are so burnt out, they don't even know how to enjoy themselves anymore. Right. And so what I researched in the book is that this has kind of been systemic for a while, right? Whether you
Mhm.
want to call it hustle porn, which we've referred to earlier,
Yeah.
whether it's just the old Puritan work ethic. Ultimately, once we switch to knowledge work, we don't really know what the goalpost is, right? And
Mhm.
so we think that we value or overvalue, for that matter, productivity, but we don't realize that even if that is something that we value, if we
Mhm.
burn ourselves out, we're not able to contribute or be the best versions of ourselves. So what does that mean? What it means is that we need to start figuring out how to take a little bit off the table for ourselves again, so that we are enjoying life, so that when we do show up for the things that matter, like our family and our jobs, we're full of vitality and vigor to do those things well.
Mm.
And so it's sort of this insidious thing that happens, right? Over time, you're like, oh, well, I just can work a little bit harder. And again, it goes to that, that mirage out there in the distance, right? Like, I'll arrive someday. And then ultimately you wake up and go, holy cow, I've just wasted my life. And
Yeah.
so what we find is the folks that are the most successful are the folks that take a little bit off the table for themselves if they're really enjoying their time. And that when they show up, for the things that are dutiful, like work and family matters, they're really in it. Sometimes it's called deliberate practice, right? And so,
Mhm.
you're really engaged in that activity, which paradoxically makes even hard things more fun, more enjoyable to be in, because you're not so burnt out. You're not looking at it as just like, oh, okay, if I just get this done, then I can move on, actually get some sleep or whatever it is. So I often like to use the fact that if you remember in the 90s, sleep deprivation was worn as a badge of honor, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
man, I was
Yeah.
just grinding.
Hustle
And
porn.
yeah, and that, I meant, we now know how asinine that was. Even the most staunch, folks that, the Gary V's of the world, that, and I like Gary V a lot,
Mhm.
you don't hear him saying, just wait, put the kids to bed and work till 3 a.m, because he knows that sets people up for failure.
Mhm.
So there needs to be a better way. Even if you're a hustler, what that means is that you should have a fun habit in your life, so that when you do show up for work, when you have that transition ritual, okay, this isn't leisure anymore. This is, time served for productivity. Then you're really crushing it within those hours too, because you're living a nice, well-rounded, well-lived life.
Yeah. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world. Totally makes all the difference in the world. It's being happy is more important than being, busyness. What's the axiom I'm trying to reach for? Busyness doesn't equal happiness, I guess. And we think that hustle porn, that busyness makes a difference. In your book, you talk about the 4 quadrants of the play model and how it will help you assess your daily activities. Tell us a little bit about that. Tease that out if you would.
Yeah. So I have a model in the book called the play model. It essentially stands for pleasing, living, agonizing, and yielding. And those things are just a interesting way to divvy up your time, so that you can see in the 168 hours you spend in any given week, how much of that is actually bringing you some sort of pleasure, right? So that you at
Mhm.
least have a balanced approach to living a joyful life. And so what happens is a lot of people that go through that realize, like, oh my goodness, everything that I'm doing is for someone else, or just something that I don't enjoy. And so even if it's things that you have to do, because some of the resistance, especially for folks stuck in the sandwich generation,
Mhm.
who are taking care of kids, but also have aging parents that they need to take care of,
Uh-huh.
it might be that they can't find time for fun. And for me to prescribe fun as, something that they need to add to their schedule would essentially be another version of toxic positivity, right? Like, hey, let's just, let's add another thing to your already full plate. So there's a bunch of strategies in the book of, okay, so you have to do this, but how could you potentially do it in a way that's more enjoyable for you, which again is going to allow you to be a better version of yourself and to show up serving those people that you have this sense of duty for in a way that not only lights you up a little bit more, but makes it more pleasant for them. Um, and then, essentially just how can you potentially free up space? So even the most busy folks, when they use this model, often find out, like, oh my goodness, I thought I had no time, but when I've done, when I've used the play model and become curious about how I spend this 168 hours, I looked on my phone app and I've actually been on Facebook 3 hours, during the week, and I could just swap that out for going to do something that I used to really enjoy, whatever that is for you, a hobby, engaging in, something as simple as bowling with friends, like anything that allows you to reconnect with the things that really did bring you joy, before you kind of got overburdened with all these things that life does to us.
Yeah, we need that time out. We need time to recharge. And so many people give, I mean, they're just running 100 miles an hour. They don't take time to breathe. They don't take time to fun. And I imagine a lot of people don't ask themselves, am I having fun in life? Am I doing this? Is this really fun? Or do I think that it's, like we mentioned before, hustle porn, where you're just like, well, if I grind hard, it'll be fun. Or like you mentioned earlier, you alluded to this, the putting it off to, well, I'll be happy in the future when I achieve this goal that I'm grinding for.
That's right. And that's, where happiness kind of becomes problematic is, one, we adapt, right? So to your point, we make more money, but that, if that kind of brings us to a new social status, we adapt to the norms of that social status. And then there are always new things that we need to go and chase, right? And then it's an active comparison. If we don't take time out for ourselves to figure out what is it that I really want to enjoy. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be a selfish act, right? It could mean, what do I want to enjoy with my family? How do I want to engage in life a little bit more playfully, so that not just me, but the people around me are actually experiencing life a little bit more pleasurably? What are these things that can contribute to my own betterment? If we don't stop and do that, oftentimes, especially with social media, it becomes an exercise in comparing with others. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything to us. It just means like, we're using somebody else's goalpost. And I can tell you, the empirical research suggests that is always not going to bring us joy, right? Because we're essentially prescribing to someone else's perception of what the good, quote unquote, good life is. And we're not thinking about what it is that actually, brings us joy. And again, that happens over time. So we even forget, a lot of adults even forget how to have fun or how to experience pleasure because they've been working for so long.
Yeah. It reminds me of that scene from, what was it, American Beauty, where the guy starts making out with his wife, and for the first time they're kind of becoming friendly again, let's put it that way. And then she notices that he's about to spill his beer on the couch and ruins the moment. And you're like, hey man, and he's like, what happened to the fun person I used to know? And I think a lot of times, we don't ask ourselves that. Am I having fun? Where's my time out? Where's my recharge space? Where's my, we just push ourselves to the ends of the earth, or push each other to the end of the earth. And we don't enjoy that moment. And being in that presence, what you're talking about with the, being fun is also being present, because you're asking yourself, am I having fun? Am I enjoying doing this? I used to have people say to me, it's great that you become successful and you've achieved your, building businesses and all this kind of thing. And now you can finally just kick back and be happy. And you're like, no, I can't. We've got a multitude of companies. We've got over 100 employees that are driving me crazy. I got a business partner that's driving me crazy. All that happens when you become more successful and you attain your goals is the tightrope that you're walking on just goes higher and higher. And you're like looking down going, I can't quit my job because no one can afford to pay me. And it's a long ways down from here, and then you realize you're beholden to so many people, hundreds of employees and stuff like that. And so it becomes harder. And I used to try to explain it to people. And there's somehow this delusion in our society that when you get money or get success or you get a bigger business or whatever your thing is, that it's going to be easier, that like somehow there's this peak that you hit and then it's all just like, oh yeah, just cruising after that.
That's
No,
right.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's the old, I remember watching Fight Club, and I've got 3 places in 3 different cities I'm living in with 4 offices. I got a BMW at any given airport, at any given time waiting for me. And I'm sitting there going, I'm miserable. And I've got this house with all the stuff in it, and everyone hates me. Everyone doesn't like me because I'm a bitter asshole CEO. I mean, I wasn't that bad, but you know what I mean? Everyone's like, we need more from you. And you're like, how much more do I need to give you? And I got to cut my heart out and cut on the string. And I remember watching Fight Club, and the line, the things you own end up owning you.
That's
And
right.
people don't realize that when you become successful, you do all that hustle porn, it just makes more work.
Yeah, and
You just
that's
have to work harder.
both a literal and metaphorical statement, right? And so I think, and another thing you touched on, just to add a scientific component, I mean, social contagion is real. So again, whether you're a leader or just the head of a household, when you get to a point where everything is, through the lens of burnout, where you're just not happy to be present, then that starts to infect everyone around you, right? And so, and it's a slow process. So you can either live in a sort of downward spiral, or you can live in an upward spiral where, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sidestep your priorities, right? I mean, you still have things that you should thrive for that are set up deliberately. But at the end of the day, also figure out how you can enjoy the process, because to your point, there is no end point. You're not going to arrive somewhere. I mean, life goes on, right? You're going to hit your goal, and then you're going to need to continue on. And if you are so episodically focused on that goal that you kill everyone to get to that point, I mean, look at what Elon's doing to Twitter right now, right? I mean, if you get to that stage where you don't have any good people left because no one around you is enjoying themselves, then you're ultimately killing the thing that you wanted to build in the first place.
There you go. There you go. It's and there's science, I guess, behind this. You cite some science studies in your book.
Yep, a lot of them.
There you go. And then one thing you talk about that I found was interesting, how fun and productivity are not at odds, but rather amplify each other. So how do you have fun and be productive, I guess?
Yeah, so there's an amazing study out of Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. It's essentially looking at what science calls the hedonic flexibility principle. And so you don't necessarily need to know what those words mean, but what the study found is that, again, obviously when we're burnt out, we look for forms of negative escapism, right? So if someone really isn't finding joy in their life, it should be of no surprise that, they go out and do things like drink or, whatever it is. But when you integrate, kind of this mosaic of fun things throughout your daily and weekly activities, that sets you up to have the resilience and the vigor and vitality to do the harder stuff. And so what the study found is the folks that are actually enjoying life and taking, some time off the table for themselves are the ones that are thriving the most, because they show up at the beginning of the day, really ready to work and really ready to seize the day. And then when that is over, then they go off and have fun, and they realize that, life is worth living, juxtaposed to the person that's just grinding it out, waiting for, that next shiny nickel at the next milestone, that doesn't really understand, when they look back after 10 years of grinding, what they did it for.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I watched when I was growing up, and a lot of people I watched accept social standards, accept, things like, hustle porn or go grind it. And then, I remember, my big thing I was taught with my generation was, hey, you go to work for the man corporation for 40 years and you come out and you get a gold watch. It's still the 70s. So you got like, that was the thing, you worked for GM for 40 years and they took care of you. They didn't lay you off. And, then the 80s kicked in, and Ivan Bioski and Greed is Good and Michael Milliken and junk bonds and, all that sort of stuff. And then everything, became transitionary. Employees became something you could easily throw out to raise your stock price. And I remember growing up watching it all. And I said to my business partner, when we started our first major business, I said to him, I go, we're both 22. And we can do one of two things. We can go for this and make this business work. Thankfully it did. Or we can go do the corporate thing we're kind of on track to. But I said, I don't know. I got to tell you, I don't think at 40 or 50, when I golden parachute out of a company, I'm going to have the energy for this.
Yeah.
And I was right, because I don't.
Well, and there are multiple headwinds that happened, right? So anyone that reads Daniel Pink, in Drive, he, showed how we moved from algorithmic work to heuristic work, which is essentially information work. So nobody knows where the goalposts are anymore.
Yeah.
And you can essentially fill your whole week with work if you want to now, because, especially with creative endeavors, right? There's always something to do. You can, there's always a new post. There's always a new idea. If you don't have a transition ritual into, okay, this isn't work time anymore, that can become problematic. And then with the advent of smartphones, our parents, the day was over when they got home, right? They had a transition ritual. They put their briefcase up, they put their coat on, and then they enjoyed time with their partner and their kids. Nowadays, we walk in still on a business meeting on our phone. So, that's a cue to our kids that they're not important yet, right? So they stay on their phones. And then, oftentimes we're answering emails till our head hits the pillow. And so we don't know when our workday is over. And so even if we're only, we can really kid ourselves that, but I am there, I'm at the park with my kids or whatever it is, or, I'm at this nice dinner with my friends. But if you peel back, like what's really happening, you're staying on your phone, and that's not real engagement, right? That's not real connection with the folks that you love. And so, another big theme, especially for this decade, is how bad, this new level of loneliness is affecting us. And that's even loneliness in the midst of thinking that we are, being with our friends when we're sitting there with our friends, but really on our phones. And so, we're getting these little hits of dopamine, but we're not getting that, that feeling of social connection that really is important.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, our parents didn't have, emails pinging you when you got home at 6:00 to watch the TV. We didn't have phones that were like, hey man, boss wants to talk to you real quick about this extra thing you got to do, or come in and work some extra hours. If your boss called, you just let him go to the answer machine and then say you weren't home or something. And leave you.
Well, not only that, but like 24/7 news cycle, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we still had these, what productivity specialists call time blocks. Like my parents would watch the news at 6 p.m. to 6:30, and then the news was over. There was nothing sort of antagonizing them throughout the day, reminding them that, two major countries are at war, and, how terrible, things are everywhere. I mean, there is an abundance of good and an abundance of bad, and that's always been there. But our access to consuming, what some people call doom scrolling, bad news now is ad nauseum, right? If you have a propensity to that type of negativity, it's always there for you now. Where before there were bumper rails because we just didn't have access to information like we used to, right?
Yeah. And I mean, if you're a CEO or if you're a PR agent for a company, or just about any company, or, everyone's a brand now. I'm a brand. I'm a brand. Everyone's a brand now. So you're doing brand management. So you're managing comments, trolls. If you're a CEO of a major company, everything can be fine and dandy, and someone says something bad, or someone bad, cites your name, and suddenly your company is, in the PR shit, and you're just like, everything was fine. And then something happens, and suddenly you're trending on Twitter, and you got to address it. And you're like, why are we trending on Twitter? What did we do? What happened? And, sometimes it doesn't even have to be you. Like, I think I'm trying to think of some recent examples where someone bad said something bad, and they include the name or a picture of a brand like Skittles or something. And the brand has to respond, even though they weren't the ones who caused the kerfuffle. They just got caught up in it. And, it's like, whoa, what, have you made a statement, or do you agree with that evil person? And you're like, what, how do we get, like, I'd just be like, are you serious? We were going along fine. No one was messing with us. We're just doing our thing, and everything's good. And, some evils out there in the world. And now, it's the paint's been thrown on our name. So yeah, it's really important to identify having fun. I enjoy my life now more without the big companies and all the things. I have you can't put a price on freedom and peace.
Absolutely.
You can't put a price on not having business partners. Um, so I love it, and there's a certain amount of sacrifice that you have to give up for that, but there's also a sense of security and living longer, because that stress kills you. What's kind of funny, I had some people that have come on the show that were some of the Gen Zers that exited with the Great Resignation, and they cashed out their 401ks. And it was funny. One gentleman has sat down and done the math on when people die, when men die, because we die earlier than women usually.
Right. About 3 years.
He'd done the math, and I think there was some genetics of cancer and stuff in his background with his family. And he said, I figure maybe I have good 10 to 15 years, or at least good 10 to 15 years to travel, see the world, and be in a body that can do that.
Yeah.
And probably enjoy it too. Like I don't know about you, but I could travel the world, but it wouldn't be that fun. Maybe if you wheeled me around everywhere in a wheelchair or something, I'd be happy. But there's a certain amount of walking where I'm like, can I just go home and sleep in my bed? I'm kind of at that age. I can see France on, I can do the Google thing and see France. I don't need to be there and smell it. But no, doing the jokes. But there's a certain point, and he was like, I want to enjoy the last few years of my life. And I could hold on to the 401k and the big retirement, but I think I'm gonna be dead by the time I try and spend it.
Yeah.
And so why not spend it now?
So everyone's going to kind of figure what their comfort level is to that. But
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of truth to understanding that, we've kind of been conditioned, because we do live in a meritocracy, that, everything's going to kind of happen down the line. You had mentioned that golden, wristwatch, right? And that's when, you get to really experience life. But if you think about it, the folks, we know this from Bronnie Ware's work on the 5 regrets of the dying, like the folks that have sort of mortgaged life, in the hopes that, all of this hard work will pay off, in your 60s or 70s, you've really lost a lot of, this capacity, because time is the only finite resource. Again, you need to be fiscally responsible, but at the end of the day, anyone can make more money, but you can't make more time. And so that's, really important to take to heart, right? Is like, okay, again, be mindful of money. We certainly don't want you to be in the poorhouse. So figure out, what that means to you. But oftentimes people way overvalue the importance of money and underestimate the fact that they only have a limited amount of time left. So I unpack that in the book, some strategies to sort of understand that time really is the only finite resource we have. And once we intimately understand that, then we start to make better choices. Often in the scientific literature, it's called time affluence. And what we know that people that do kind of worry more about how do I live my best life through time instead of money tend to be a lot happier than the folks that think they need to accumulate wealth to be happy.
Yeah, and you bring up an important point, because we don't know how much time we have. It can end tomorrow. And
For those who follow football, look what happened yesterday.
yeah, the one who he had a heart attack. They had to spend was the Buffalo Bills. They had to spend 15 minutes doing CPR on that gentleman. And I've always enjoyed the game of football, but that's being at death's door over. And it didn't look like it was that hard of a hit, but people have different physical internals that sometimes don't respond well to stuff, or it could have been anything, but you don't want to see that. But yeah, we don't know when our time comes. You could be like, I'm going to do hustle porn for 10 years and then I'll enjoy my life, and 5 years in you get hit by a bus.
When you brought up stress, we know people that do grind it out like that tend to
stress kills you. Yeah.
I mean,
stress
just
kills you.
Google type A and correlate that with health outcomes, and all that research is there too.
The stress kills you, and everything you do. I mean, I drank heavy for about 20 years of my life, and drank a lot of caffeine, drank a lot of Mountain Dews, sugar and the caffeine. I still drink a lot of caffeine, but I drink coffee. But, for me, drinking, especially I would drink in the evenings. And usually that was to get more work done. And I'm like, hey, if I drink this, I get a little more, because drinking turns to sugar. And so I'd be like, hey, I can work a few more hours and relax. I can get a few more things done, and as CEO and self-employed, you're like, push it. And, you've got to take that day, like you talk about in your book, to go, let's be happy today. Let's enjoy today, because that may be all you have. Tomorrow you could wake up and the bus runs over you or whatever, or having fun with the people in your life too. You never know. They can go at any time as well. And you never know. So be
I'm
present.
sure you've heard the adage, right? Most self-employed entrepreneurs hate their boss. So
Yeah.
try to not hate your boss.
I see him in there. I like him. He's good. We're going to keep him now, because the last time I checked, he's the only right I got. Until I can figure out how to possess another body, we keep holding these demonic pagan rituals every Halloween at the house here, but haven't quite got the whole exorcism transfer thing down. But we're just going to stick with the demon that's in my body for now, I guess, right now. So the power of Christ compels you. Anyway, exorcist joke for those of you who haven't seen the movie. So it's been wonderful, Mike, to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There you go. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Yeah, again, I talk about the science of fun at michaelrucker.com, and the book, The Fun Habit, my debut from Simon Schuster, is out this very second. Today's the launch day. So
nice.
Yeah.
There you go. So congratulations on the new book. These are always
Thank you so
fun.
much.
They're always fun, and I hope it sells 1 billion, and please come back for the next one.
All right, thanks so much.
There you guys go. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold. The Fun Habit: How the Pursuit of Joy and Wonder Can Change Your Life. Use it for the new year. It's a good time to set some new resolutions. Of course, the resolution I'm keeping this year is still at 2K. Maybe we'll move to 4K on the gaming video screens, but we like 2K. It works well. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to go further show your family, friends, and relatives. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, all those crazy places we're on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.